Hello and welcome back to part 5 of this course, Getting an Organisation Started on AWS, a guide to the boring bits that no one wants to do. So in this part, we'll actually be doing things that we can give to the users. So what we will be doing is we'll be creating a directory, which is a store of users, and we'll be showing how to manage that, so how to add users, delete users, how to administer that, and we'll be using that directory to provide WorkMail and WorkSpaces, so an email address and inbox, as well as a tool to view and send emails to our users, as well as a virtual desktop environment if the users need that as well. So this is going to be quite a big one because we're going to be going through setting up the directory, setting up the network infrastructure for that directory, configuring WorkMail and configuring WorkSpaces, and then providing a end-to-end process for registering the users to giving them access to everything they need. So I'm going to try and keep the theory nice and simple. So buckle in and I hope you enjoy. So what is Amazon Workspaces? Well, Amazon Workspaces is a desktop as a service remote desktop environment, so we can give users a Windows 10 or a Linux desktop for home or office work. It's AWS hosted and it runs in an AWS managed VPC, and we give it subnet IDs from our VPC and it injects that into our VPC. VPC being a virtual private cloud, so network infrastructure. It's a similar service to Citrix if you've ever used that, so it allows desktop as a service solutions, and it uses directory service for auth and user management, so it can pull its users from a directory in directory service. So it provides a configurable and consistent desktop for apps and files, so you can completely configure the image that Workspaces uses, and we connect to it via software installed on our own computer, so through the Workspaces client. We can charge it either monthly or we can charge it by the hour, and we can also leave it always running, or we can enable auto stop, so it turns itself off if it's not in use after a certain amount of time, which can be useful for saving money. Amazon WorkMail, on the other hand, is a secure and managed business email and calendar service with support for existing desktop and mobile email client applications. So what that means is we have an environment for providing emails to our users, so the users can log in and view their emails and send their emails. We as administrators can apply custom inbound and outbound rules to WorkMail, and we can also bind it to our custom domain name, so we can give users an email address with our domain name that we've purchased. They can use the web front end to access their email, or administrators can configure it to, say, the Windows Mail app or the Gmail mobile email app, or any kind of email app that supports IMAP integration. So how that works from a network perspective is we'll have the app incorporation directories account, and in there we'll have directory in directory service, we'll have Workspaces, EC2 and WorkMail. EC2 directory service and Workspaces all need to live in a VPC, so they all need subnets. We could create a network infrastructure on the directories account, but what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a network account with a VPC that's shared through Resource Access Manager. So the network account will have a VPC created by Control Tower, and we can then share the public subnets, and if we wanted to, the private subnets of that through a resource share in Resource Access Manager. and then the directories account will use that when configuring WorkSpaces directory service and EC2. So the actual process for setting up a user will be something like this. Firstly, they'll remote to the domain or directories controller and create a user. We'll then import the user from the directory into the WorkMail organization. At that point, we'll have an email address and a mailbox for that user we can give to the user. We can optionally import the user into WorkSpaces if we need to provide that user with a virtual desktop environment. And we'll then create that user in Identity Center. Remember, Identity Center does not use the same store as WorkMail and WorkSpaces in our demo, although it can be configured to do that. But we'll create the user in Identity Center with the email we've already given the user and grant them access to AWS accounts and or third-party SAML enabled apps. From that email, they can then accept that invitation and access the SSO portal that Identity Center provides. And we would then need to create that user in any third-party apps that we use. So let's say Slack, for example, we would create that user in Slack with that email address of that user. They would then receive an email inviting them to Slack, and they can then accept that. They can then go to Slack directly or go through the SSO portal to go on to Slack. So the setup we'll need is actually pretty simple but can get long-winded, so I'll try and explain it as simply as possible, and in the walkthrough I'll walk it through in this order. So first off, we'll need an account for the shared VPC, a network account. Here we'll create a VPC, a network infrastructure, so to speak, that we will use across many different accounts. So we'll also use it for our WordPress accounts in the later part of the course, and we'll be using the public subnets of this VPC when we create a directory in the directories account. So we'll be creating a simple AD directory, and when we create a directory we need to specify two subnets. That's because when you create a directory in directory service, it actually creates the directory in two different availability zones, so it's highly available. So what we'll then do, once we've created that directory, specified the DNS name for that directory and specified the two subnets, what we'll do is we'll create a EC2 instance, what we can call a domain controller, that's attached to that directory. We can then install Active Directory tools on that server. When we first create a directory in directory service, it creates an administrator user for us with a password reset. It's that account, the administrator account, that we use to log into the EC2 instance. Okay. So once we've created our directory, that's using our shared network from our shared VPC, and then we have a server attached to it with the ability to remote to that server and create users in that directory. After we've created our first user or two, we can then create a WorkMail organization and configure it to use that directory. So we'll be able to pull users from the directory into WorkMail and give them an email address. By default, that will be something like acmecorp.awsapps.com. That will be the email address, but we want a custom one, so we'll also configure the DNS settings for that. So I use GoDaddy for my domain, but in part 3, if you created your domain in the domains account through Route 53, it will still apply. What you'll do is when you create WorkMail, you'll get a bunch of DNS records, and you'll use those DNS records in Route 53 or GoDaddy or 123reg or wherever you've registered your domain to configure it. So that means we'll be able to use our custom domain name for an email address. Once we've done that, we will be able to configure workspaces for our directory. We'll register our directory with workspaces, and then we can create virtual desktop environments for our users if we needed to. Okay, so that's it architecturally. Okay, so that's that for the architecture. What we'll now do is we'll start the walkthrough, okay? So it's going to be quite a big walkthrough, so I'll try and put chapters in the video so you know which part is which. But after we've done the walkthrough and after we've created all the architecture needed for this, I'll then go through a process for creating the users, and I'll walk you through end to end how to create a user and then how to tie that back into Identity Center with creating the account there, sending the email to the new mailbox, they can accept that invitation, and then they can access SAML-enabled apps if they want to, or if they need to. The AWS accounts they need, they'll be able to have their own virtual desktop environments, and they'll have their own email address. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, and welcome back. So the first thing we want to do is to create a directory in directory service. This directory is where we're going to store the users for WorkMail and WorkSpaces. So through this directory we'll create new accounts, or new users, sorry, to keep the terminology clear, create new users, and then we can import those into WorkMail and create email addresses and mailboxes, and import them into WorkSpaces and set up a virtual desktop environment for those new users. So we want to create this directory in the directories account we created earlier in the course. Now, as mentioned in the theory part, our directory in directory service requires 2 subnets with internet access. To actually manage the users in the directory, we also need a server, which is going to be an EC2 instance in our case, that acts as a domain controller. So IT members of our organisation will need to be able to remote to this EC2 instance and use that to manage Active Directory, to create users and create groups. Therefore, this server will need to be in a public subnet. This server will be a Windows server, since it's the simplest to set up for Active Directory, and it can run within the free tier. Now, if you cast your mind back, you'll remember that when we actually created the directories account, we created it without a publicly accessible VPC. That was because creating a public VPC creates a NAT gateway, which incurs consistent charges. It bills per the hour. Now, we didn't want to get charges on our account when we're not actually doing anything, so we created it pretty much bare bone. But now we need internet access. Now we need subnets in the VPC that we can use that can talk to the internet. So we have options here. We could log into this account as an administrator user and just create the public subnets in the account and attach them to the VPC already created. That would work. Or we could destroy and recreate the account and change the VPC configuration options in Account Factory and recreate it with a public VPC. Or we can do this. What we can do is we can create a shared network account with a VPC, and we can share the subnets of that VPC to the entire organization, which means our directories account will be able to use those subnets, and any other accounts we create in the future, such as accounts for WordPress, will also be able to use those subnets. That will help keep costs down because we won't need to be creating NAT gateways and a bunch of accounts, and it also keeps management simpler because we only have one VPC we need to manage. Now, to get started, let's go to Control Tower and go to Account Factory. If we edit the Account Factory network configuration, we can see there's a radio button at the top called Internet Accessible Subnet. If we tick that, that will create a public subnet in the VPC when we create the account through Account Factory. We also have an option here which says maximum number of private subnets. This is private subnets per availability zone. So if we're deploying to the Ireland region, which has 3 availability zones, that will create 3 private subnets. So we can leave that as 1. We can leave the CIDR range as it is, and we're deploying ours to Ireland. You don't have to do that. You could deploy it to North Virginia or Paris or Seoul, but in what we've done so far in Control Tower is we've configured it just to manage North Virginia and Ireland. So I'm going to take Ireland and press Save. What I can now do is create the account, and I can specify the account email, display name, identity center username, and the organizational unit and the IAM identity center username. So for OU, what we can do is we can put it in the shared services, and then we can fill out the rest of the details. Okay, so I'm just going to do Josh Acme Cart Network. So again, I'm just using an alias for this, for the account email. And then to keep it in line with the naming conventions we've done so far, I'm going to name mine Acme Corporation Network. So I actually created a networking account earlier, and I've tried to delete it, but of course it takes a while to leave the organisation, so don't worry if you don't see that networking one in your list, but there you go. I've submitted that to create my network account. And I'll just show you actually. Go to organization. Yeah, you see mine there, networking. That's not, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so whilst the network account is enrolling, there's two things you can do, okay? Two things you can prepare. So go to AWS Organizations, open that in the new tab, and also go to Resource Access Manager and open that in the new tab. So we're going to be creating a VPC that we're going to share. To do that, we need the organization ID. So go and copy that from settings in organizations and make note of that. And we're also going to need to enable sharing to the AWS organization. You may need to be logged in as the management account to tick that. So if that's not ticked, log in with the management account and tick that, okay? Now we can just go back to Control Tower and come back when your account is fully enrolled. Okay, so now that the account is enrolled, what we can do is we can go to Users and Access. So you can see the network and directors accounts. We can go to Users and Access, and we can create an admin user who has administrator access to both, just to keep things simple. So we're in our data center, we go to Users, and we're going to add a user. I'm going to call mine something like Mr. Administrator. And I'm going to put a underscore there, okay? So I'm going to send the email for the password, and I'm just going to use an alias on my own email. Something like that, like admin@stather.link. Yep. Okay, confirm that. I'm going to call my guy administrator. So you don't have to do this, but having a single user account with the right level of access to both of those accounts, because there's going to be a bit of back and forth, just makes sense. So I'm going to, okay, I'm looking for an admin group. Okay, there isn't one. I thought there would be. So I'm going to create a group for administrators. Is there not one? No. Okay. I'm going to create a group for administrators, like so. And I'm going to create that group. Okay, so now I can go back to the create user journey and refresh that, and I can see administrators there. So next. Okay, and add that user. So I've created my Mr. Administrator user. I'm now going to go to AWS accounts, and I'm going to give the administrator, which ones? So network and directories. Okay, I'm going to give this group, I've just created the administrator group, the administrator, AWS administrator access permission set to those two accounts. So we can use the administrator access permission set we created earlier, but that's just the same as AWS administrators access. So I'm going to use that. Great. Okay, so I've got an email with the SSO link, so I'm going to copy that from my email and paste that in. Now this might be a bit funny with conflicting, okay, seemingly not. Okay, so I'm going to set a secure password for this user. I'm not sure if it's going to be a bit funny because I already had a session open, but it should be fine. Okay, so go to MFA devices and I'm going to register a device. So yeah, okay, so something looks wrong. So I still have those 7 accounts and the session seems to be inactive. So 1 minute. Yeah, so okay, if this happens to you, just sign out, because if you click in there, you see that's not the right level of access and it's not what we've just created. So it must be storing an old session. So that's fine. Just sign out of there, and then we can sign back in with the user we created. So Mr. Administrator, not sure if there was, yep, okay. So then I'm going to choose the password I just set. Okay, right, so there's an underscore in that, I believe. Sorry, my bad. Let's try that again. Okay, yeah, so Mr. underscore administrator, sorry. Okay, and then that strong password we set, sign in, and that should sign us in. Yep, okay, so now we can see those 2 accounts, and I'm going to register an MFA device. So go ahead, get your authenticator app open and authenticate your device, and then come back in, and then you can see we have access to those 2 accounts, and we've secured this administrator user. So we go to the network account and we can begin to configure the VPC. Okay, so now that we're signed into the network account, what we can do is make sure you're in the Ireland area as well, or wherever you deployed your account VPC to, and go to VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So what we can see is you should only have one VPC in here. I do have seconds, I've already got a share set up, but you'll see that one VPC has been created. And in that VPC, you can see all the subnets for that VPC. So we want to share the public subnets, okay? Subnet 1 and subnet 2. These are what we want exposed. So if you go to select one and go to sharing and share subnet, you can create a resource share. So we can run Resource Access Manager, and we're creating a resource share, and we can give that a name. So we can call that subnet share. You can choose your two subnets, public 1 and public 2. Okay, we don't want accounts outside of our organization to access this resource share. So deselect that, scroll up, make sure everything's set up correctly, and click Create Resource Share. Okay, so now that the resource share is created, it's there, the subnet share, what we can do is we can select that and modify that, and we can share that to our organization. So on the left, you see associated permissions. You don't need to do anything with that, but you have grant access to principals. So allow sharing within your organization, drop that down to organization, and enter the organization ID you copied down earlier. Okay? Make sure you click the add button, it's easy to forget. You can see that selected there in the selected principals. Click next, and then you can see that organization shared. Update the resource share. Okay, so now those two subnets are shared with the entire organization. So if you go back to VPC and click back to subnets, you can click that public subnet 1 or 2, click sharing, and see that the subnet share is there. So now that we've shared those subnets, what we can do is we can go to the directories account and start to create our directory using those two subnets. So go to directories account and make sure you're in the Ireland area or wherever your VPC is created, your shared VPC. Go to directory service and then set up directory. So you can see all the options here. We're going to simple ID as already discussed, but you can see all the different types of directory. So with simple ID, go next, and you can see here the price difference between small and large. Now, I'm not made of money, so I'm going to use small. It's going to limit its users, but that's fine. And now we need a directory DNS name. So this is a fully qualified domain name for the directory, but it doesn't have to be a real domain. It just needs to be resolvable within the VPC, which is what we'll do next after we create the directory. So I like to do corp.mydomainname.tod. So, and then for the NetBIOS name, it's just a shortened name. It doesn't matter what that is. So for me, corp.acompanymakingeverything and Acme Corp. Now, the administrator user is the default admin user created in the AD. So that's what we're going to use to remote to the domain controller. So set a strong password for that and make note of it. And if you want, you can give your directory a description. Click next, and you'll see now not just the control tower VPC in this account, but the shared VPC from the network account. So click that, and then choose your subnets. So you have two subnets available to you, which are the two ones you shared. Select those, and then click next. And then if you're fine with all that, you can create your directory and it will start to create. Now, it may take a while to set up, but keep on refreshing and come back when that is in the created status. Okay, so now that our directory has created, let's click into that directory, and there's two pieces of information we need. The DNS address. Copy those two values, and now what we need to do is we need to make the directory DNS name resolvable within our VPC. So with those DNS names copied, close out of there and go back into the network account. Okay, now that that's loaded, go into VPC, and what you want to find on the left bar, you want to find DHCP option sets. Okay. Now create a DHCP option set in the top right corner. So we can give this a name, but this is going to be attached to the VPC and will allow the VPC to resolve that name to those IPs. So you can call that directory service DHCP or whatever you like really. And you want the domain name, so corp, in my case corp.accompanymakingeverything.co.uk, whatever DNS name you use on your directory. Paste the IP addresses in and comma separate those. And that's all the settings you need for this. So scroll down, you can have a look if you want and what everything else does, but you don't need to care about that. So create that DHCP option sets, and now we need to associate it with our VPC. So go to your VPC, drop down actions and edit DHCP option set, and select the DHCP option set you just created and save those changes. Now that you've saved that, what you can do is go back to the directories account. So what we're ready for now is to create our domain controller server. Okay, so we're in our directories account, as you can see here. What we need to do now is to create our domain controller server. So go ahead and go to EC2, and when you're there, you want to go to launch instance. So this is going to be the machine where we manage Active Directory users and groups. So we can give this a name, we can call it domain controller. Okay. It's going to be a Windows 3-tier eligible 2022 server. We're going to proceed to login without a key pair, which is fine for now. We can edit our network settings and make sure we choose the shared VPC and one of the shared subnets. Doesn't matter which subnet. Okay, we want auto assign IP enabled, and we're going to create a security group for the EC2 instance. So we can call this DC for domain controller security group. We can call this, talking like SpongeBob, security group for our domain controller. Okay, so inbound rules, so only allow from your IP address. Okay, there's nothing we need to do with the network, so scroll down and go into advanced details. So we want to choose our domain, and now we need an IAM role for the EC2 to launch in, to run in, and it needs those two policies. So open that in a new tab, create new IAM profile, and copy one of those. Go on create role, and on the use case, select EC2, click next, and then search that managed policy. Okay, copy the other one as well, paste that in. Also, there's two filters there, so I'll cancel that, and you should be able to see that. Select. Okay, so now we have two permission policies selected. That's fine. Go down and click next. Then we can give this role a name. So something like EC2 or EC2 domain controller role. Create that role and wait for that to create. Okay, that's created, so you can close that and go back to your EC2 journey, refresh that, and now you can see the roles there. So click that, and then leave that ticked. Ignore that red message. I don't know why I'm getting that, but I shouldn't be. So just make sure you've got all the settings right. That's everything you need, so let's have a look. Okay, the role, the directory, yep. Okay, the security group, yep. The VPC, yep, no key pair. Okay, launch instance. Okay, that's going to launch. And we can view that here. And we want to come back when it's in the running state with both status checks passed. That state there and status check. So come back when that's started. Okay, so now that your EC2 instance is running with both status checks passed, what we can do is we can go and connect to that. So go to Actions, Connect, and then RDP Client. You want to download that file or make note of the public DNS, and then open that file or open up RDP. So now we're in RDP. We've got the computer name there, the EC2 name, and for the username, you want to type in the directory DNS. So In our case, it'd be corp.accompanymakingeverything.co.uk. And then we want /administrator, since that's the name of the user created when we created the directory. The password will be the password you made note of when you created the directory. So paste that password in, and it should boot up the EC2 instance. It may take a while to connect, especially if it's the first time opening it, since it will have to bootstrap everything and boot up for the first time. So you can see here now, we've got that black screen, it's opening up. We want to wait for that to boot up fully. Okay, so now we're in. You can see our new EC2 instance. And we want to make our way over to Server Manager. So, okay, that's glitchy. For some reason it won't let me use the search bar. Okay, so just find Server Manager from the Windows Start menu, Server Manager there. What we want to do is we want to install the Active Directory tools through Server Manager. So what you can do is you can go to Add Roles and Features. It may take a while for that to be ready since the server is still booting up. So keep on trying until you get to it. Okay, so here we are. Carry on clicking Next, and on Server Selection make sure that server's there. Next, Next, and then you're on Features. So you want to make your way down to Remote Server Administration Tools. Drop that down, and then Role Administration Tools. So the top one, ADDS and ADLDS Tools, and the DNS Server Tools. Select both of those, click Next, and Install. We can tick Restart, but it doesn't matter because we'll be restarting it through EC2 anyway. So you can leave that unticked if you want, and click Install. So we're going to want to wait until the install is finished. And when that's installed, we can close the server and go back to EC2. So come back when that is installed. Okay, so that's installed. So we can close out of here now and close the server. So end the RDP session. Make your way back to EC2, and you want to find our instance. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to stop this, go to instance state stop, and then when that's in the stopped state, it's in stopping right now, when it's in the stopped state, we want to start that by going instance state start, and then wait for it to be in the running state with the status checks both passed. Okay, so now that our EC2 instance is back up running with both status checks passed, we can connect to that instance and we can create a Active Directory user. So copy that DNS, go back to your RDP, make sure you got your computer name there and your username still there. That shouldn't have changed, but enter those details and connect. Okay, so in the search bar on the bottom left, go to Active Directory Users and Computers. Find that, open it, and then drop down your directory, right click Users, New User, and fill in the details. As you can see here, I filled in a user for Joe Smith. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a strong password for that user. So set the password, and then click Next, and it will confirm that you're creating this user in this directory. Click Finish. Okay, and now we're ready to RDP into this user. So what we're going to do first is, you'll notice when I created that user, I checked the box, user must change password on next login. Because we're going to RDP to this user, we need to untick that box. So find that user and click Properties, go to Account, and don't do that. Yeah, untick user must change password just for now, so we can directly log into that user straight away. Okay, so we need to add that Active Directory user as a RDP user. So right click the Windows symbol at the bottom left and click System. From there, you can go to either Remote Desktop on the left or Remote Desktop link on the right. You go to the same thing. At the bottom, select your user account, and then add the user account. Enter joe.smith, and then press Enter. Oops. Okay. So we have that user here. That's going to add it as a user who can remote connect. Press OK. You can close that down, and you can disconnect from the EC2 instance. Log back into RDP, and this time, as a username, enter your NetBIOS name, so the shorthand name for the user, acmecore in my case, / the username, and click connect, and that will log in with that user. As you can see here, we've logged in and our user is Joe Smith. Okay, so now that we've created our first AD user, we're ready to configure WorkMail. So go back to the AWS dashboard. In the directories account still, logged in as our Mr. Administrator user, we can go to WorkMail. So go ahead and create your organization in WorkMail. Okay, so now we have the option with the domains. If you followed part 3 of the course and registered a domain in a domains account, then you could, if you configure that to share that zone, you could use that. But even if you haven't, or if you have, you can still click the external domain. What this will do is it will create a bunch of domain records for us to add to the DNS settings where our domain lives. My domain is in GoDaddy, but even if you registered yours in Route 53 on the domain account, once you've done this and created your organization, you'll see the domain records. So just enter the domain name here, and you can even set an alias for your domain name. So I'm going to call mine a company. Actually, I could just call mine Acme Corporation UK. Okay, that's your alias. So then go into advanced settings, and you want to select the directory that we've created. Okay, and we can use WorkMail managed key for encryption. So create that organization. Oh, that's validating for some reason. Maybe it's too long, so we can just call it Acme Corp UK. Oh right, no, you're not allowed capital letters, and turns out that's already taken, so Acme Corp UK, all lowercase. That can be our alias. So go ahead and create your organization. Okay, so this is going to start to create the WorkMail organization. That may take a few minutes, so just come back when that's created. Okay, so I've created mine. Here it is, it's active. So click into here, and then what you want to do is you want to click into domains on the left hand side. Click domains. Okay, and then you can see there our domain is pending. So here you have a bunch of records, DNS records, that you need to add to the DNS settings of your domain. So if you have followed part 3, then you want to create a new browser session and log in to the domain account and open up Route 53. Me, however, I'm going to go to GoDaddy, but it doesn't matter. What you want to do is you want to go to the DNS settings of wherever your domain is registered. So you can go to products in GoDaddy, click into your domain, DNS, manage zones, click into your domain, and here you have the records for this domain. So of course, if you've not done it through GoDaddy, you have to go through a different process, and if you've done it in Route 53, you have to go to the Route 53 account, the domains account, and go to the settings. So what you're going to do is you're going to be pasting these records in one at a time. So you can see it's a text record. So I put the name and value in there from WorkMail. And then this one here is an MX record. So you can see 2 values there in the values. If we go to MX here, you see there's a name, a priority, which in our case will be 10. As you can see there, 10. And then the rest of the value. So I'll paste that value in and get rid of the number, and you can add that record. So what you want to do is you want to go through and do this for each individual one, and if you refresh, you can see them update in real time. So just carry on refreshing that until that's verified, or you can go ahead and carry on with the others. See, I got a rate accepted there, rate exceeded there because I refreshed too many times. So come back, do those. You can see here I've finished the first 2, and you can see those are marked as green now. And there's some security ones below. Go and add them as well, and then at the end, you can come back and set up the mail from domain. Okay, so we're back. They're still pending. I've done all those and verified those. So from the mail from, click on that link at the bottom. In SES, go to verified identities, and then custom mail from domain, edit. Here you can select use a custom mail from domain, and then there's going to do mail.mydomain. Save those changes. And what you should get now is new records to add to your DNS settings. So you can see here, there's 2 new records, an MX and a text record. So go and apply those, and then come back when you are done. So I'm just going to do it and go with edit here. Add those 2. So that's an MX record. That priority is 10. So copy the 10 from there. Same with the text record. Copy that value, paste that value, and add the record. Okay. So now, if we refresh this, oh, for some reason it's kicked me out of my session. Just going to log back into there. Okay, go back to WorkMail. Close that. Okay, click into our organization, go back to domains. As you can see, we can select our custom domain and set it as the default domain. Now you can see all the records are added and updated. So what we can do now is we can create an email for our Joe Smith user. See, it's automatically imported that from the directory. So you can click him and press enable, and it will create his joe.smith@companymakingeverything.co.uk email address. Isn't that nice? But Josh, what about the mailbox? What about my mail? Well, don't worry about that. What we can do is if we go to the WorkMail organization and click into that, you can see a link at the bottom to access WorkMail. This is what you'll provide to your users. Oh, I'm already logged in. Let me just log out of that. Okay, so what you can do is you can put in the joe.smith user we've created so far with their password. As you can see, the user can get into their mailbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to send a test email from my personal email to here. If we refresh that, you can see that's come through. And what we can do is we can reply to that. Hola. Send that. And we can see it transition from Outbox out to the person's email address. That's gone through end-to-end email. So that's basically it for WorkMail. So enough of that. So what we can do is we can log out of that. Yep. Okay, and now what we can do is we can start prepping workspaces so we can provide virtual desktop environments to our users, in this case to the Joe Smith user. So head over to Workspaces. Again, make sure you're in Ireland and you're in the directives account. So the UI has been awkward recently. The best way to actually get to the Workspaces navigation is go to Workspaces Web, get started, and then from there go to the workspace, proper workspaces, and then go to directories perhaps. Okay, and now we can force the proper workspaces navigation UI. I think that's just a bug right now in Amazon's console. But either way, go to workspaces and create workspace. I'm just going to rate that 2 for the service console. Okay, so select the directory, make sure it's your directory, and it's going to need to be registered, so click register. Here, just choose any of those 2 shared subnets. And you can enable self-service permissions or workdocs, but we're not going to do either. Workdocs is quite useful though, for workspaces and WorkMail users. That's shared documents. So select that registered directory and click next. We won't be creating any users, instead we'll be identifying users. So select the Joe Smith user we've just created. Don't know what that KRB, okay. Select that user and click next. Okay, now we want the bundle. So we can give our users Linux desktops, or we can give them Windows desktops. Linux desktops comes with a bunch of really cool stuff, and Windows desktops come with Internet Explorer 11 and Firefox, so it's a great deal there. But most people are comfortable with Windows, so select Windows, make sure it's in the free tier if you don't want all your money being spent. And then here we can choose the running mode. So always on bills monthly and auto stop bills hourly, and stops the instance when it's not in use. So keep that cheap and select that with 1 hour. There's no customizations we need to do, although we can change the size of the user volume and root volume if we wanted to, but click next. Review that, so our directory, importing the Joe Smith user, auto stop 1 hour, create workspace. Okay, so it's available. What we can do now is we can show you how to remote into this. So if you click in here, you can see the details, and one detail in particular is the registration code. So you're going to want to go to clients.amazonworkspaces.com and download your client. This is the software we use to connect to the workspace. I'm on Windows, so I've downloaded the 64-bit Windows installation. I'll provide that link in the comments, but copy that registration code, and the Workspaces UI is going to prompt us for that code. So as you can see here, I've pasted that code in. Click continue, and it's going to prompt us for our username and password. So enter the Joe Smith username and the password. Okay, and sign in. And that's then going to connect us to our Workspaces client. So that's going to load our virtual desktop environment, and here we are. As you can see, we hit no for that, that's fine. It's a bit slow. As you can see, it's launched our desktop, it's Windows 10. We have Firefox, we have Windows Explorer, so we can open Firefox to search things, and we can open up File Explorer. And you can see here, just like any other Windows 10 desktop, you can enter your user profile. You can see that there. You've got all your stuff. So this is a full desktop environment for us to play around in. Yep, Firefox can open twice apparently. And there you go, we've got a web browser. So this should be enough for our users to do their daily work. We have other stuff up here like settings and view workspaces stuff. You don't have to worry about that. Essentially, this is the desktop environment we can give to our users. So that's everything for desktops, but what else we can do is, if you remember earlier, we set up Slack as part of SSO for Identity Center. So I'm just inviting our user to our Slack workspace through Slack. And then if we go to WorkMail and go to the inbox for Joe Smith, you'll be able to see a invitation link for Slack, right? We can then join the organization in Slack, join the workspace as it's called in Slack. And then what we can do is we can create an Identity Center user for Joe Smith, give them access to no AWS accounts, but we can prove that we can click through and get into Slack. So I've just accepted the invitation link from the mailbox, and I'm just going to specify our name. I'm not sure if that link's worked actually. Looks a bit weird. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, continue with email. And I'm going to enter our name. So Joe Smith. You can set a password. I'm just going to type anything in for this. Okay, no, that's weak. Okay, I'll set a strong password. No problem. Okay, yep. Create that account. So I'm going to create the account through Slack. So this is outside AWS. This is within Slack itself, but I guess that would be one of the second steps after creating our user's email address would be to add them to whatever apps you need. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sign out of the single sign-on, and I'm going to log in with the management user. Okay, sign in. So I'm logging in with the management account so I can add the Joe Smith user to Slack through Identity Center. I could also give him access to a AWS account, and I'll probably give the management user access to the directives account as well, because I don't think we have admin access over that right now. So first off, go to users. We need to create our user in Identity Center, because right now we've just got it in AD for Workspace and WorkMail, but we've not got it in Identity Center. So create the user. This will send an email to the mailbox for them to accept and join your organization, just like we've done before previously in the course. So I don't need to add them to a group, I don't think. Let's just see. No, he doesn't need access to any accounts yet, so I don't think I'll add him to a group. No, let's click next. Okay, add the user. Okay, so that's created Joe Smith. So what I can do is actually go to applications. I wasn't sure what I was going to do first. Go to applications and we'll give Joe Smith Slack access. So click Slack or whatever app you have, click into that and then assign the user. And then find the Joe Smith user. Okay, assign that user. So we should have an email for Identity Center for us to join. So first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to add the management user administrator access to the directives account, just to keep things in line with what we've got so far with the management user having access to most accounts. So before we go and mess around with Joe Smith's user, we can just add the administrator access to the management account. You don't have to do this. In fact, you could actually add it to the Mr. Administrator account we created earlier. But let's refresh this. Okay, so we can get into the directories account with management. So we're going to go in here, go to the WorkMail URL and get our invitation to join SSO for Joe Smith. So go to WorkMail, not directory service, WorkMail. You may already have this bookmarked, in which case don't bother messing around with the users, but I want to make it as clear as possible for the demonstration. So go into the organization we've created, go into WorkMail and log in with Joe Smith if you're not already logged in. Okay, and we can see here we can accept that invitation and it's going to open up an SSO link for Joe Smith to log in with. So set a new password for Joe Smith. Okay. Now it's going to ask us to sign in as Joe Smith. So I guess just to recap, I mean, first thing you do is when you add new users, you'd go to the domain controller, remote into that, and then add the user in AD. Then you can import it into WorkMail. Import that into WorkSpaces if you want, and then you can add it to SSO, invite them, they'll then accept it through the invitation and they can access whatever AWS account you've given them, or in our case here, as you can see, access to Slack. So I'm just going to close Slack. And I'm going to sign out. What we can do now is if you wanted to, we can give Joe Smith access to an AWS account. So we can log in to SSO with the management account, or for any account that has access to administer Identity Center in the management account. Gotta get the MFA code for this guy. Yep, paste that MFA code in. Let's go to the management account and we can give Joe Smith access to, say, the directives account. It depends on what type of user the user is. You can create groups and permission sets for different types of users. So some may be sales users and have access to no AWS accounts, but they may have access to Slack and Salesforce and WorkMail and maybe a workspace or not. IT users could have access to different AWS accounts, but not necessarily Salesforce. It's up to you how you structure your organization and access, but these are all the tools you need. You'll create a user in the domain controller through Active Directory, and then you can import them into WorkMail, which is what you'll pretty much always do. And it's up to you whether you give them a workspace or not, and whether you create them in Identity Center or not, if you need to give them access to third-party SAML apps or to AWS accounts. So we're just signing into Joe Smith through Identity Center. Now I've given him access to the directories account. And you can see he has the directories account and he has Slack. So I hope that's helped clear some things up. Hopefully that's understandable. And in the next part of the course, we'll be creating a WordPress site. So you won't actually need the directory or the email or any of that sort of stuff. So what we'll do is I'll show you how to tear that stuff down so you can shut that down safely without incurring too many costs. Okay, so we're going to be closing down Workspaces and WorkMail and in our directory. So go to Workspaces, select your workspace, and just select delete. This will delete that user's workspace. It's now in the terminating state, as you can see. Okay, great. So now we can go to WorkMail and close down the WorkMail organization. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you want to clear down your resources and keep your costs down, then it'd be a good idea to close this. So select that, delete, and just type in the organization alias. And now that's in the deleting state. Okay, so now we're ready to go to the directory and delete the directory. Oh, no, actually, let's go to EC2. We need to close the domain controller first before we delete the directory. So select our domain controller instance from EC2, drop down instance state and select terminate. That's going to transition it to the terminated state. Okay, and now we can go to our directory. So directory service, directories, select the directory, and delete directory. And it's saying we can't because it's still registered in Workspaces. Okay, so head over back to Workspaces real quick. Okay, and then on the left hand side in directories, we can find that there, select it, actions, and deregister that. Okay, it won't work if your workspace is still running, so wait until the workspace is terminated and then we can do this. Okay, awesome. That's now registered false, so we can go back to directory service. Find our directory again, select that, actions, delete directory, and then copy in the directory DNS name, like so.